folks. Today at this Sea Ranch Life, we're going to have a brief conversation with Dane Jasper. Dane is one of our newest board members, just elected a couple of weeks ago, and he's agreed to join us here. And we'll talk a little bit about who he is and where he's coming from and what some of his early thoughts are on the board. Dane, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to connect, George, and record something that folks can view later.
They can. They can. And they can send you the emails and the phone calls and whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
Hopefully you won't be inundated, but you
No,
never
but
know. You never
yeah,
know.
love the input, really.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Well, let's talk a little bit about goals for the board and the community at large. And I want to start off by asking you what goals do you think are the important things in the next 12 over the next 12 months, the first
Mhm.
year on the board? What do you think are the top priorities?
Well, I would say my hope, and I don't know the path to achieve this, but I'd say my top goal is to um, improve the tenor of the relationship between members and the board.
Mhm.
This was a message this was my frustration as a member, and this was the message that I brought in my candidacy, was that I felt like there could be a better collaborative win-win working relationship between the membership and the board and the staff. And that's not to say that it's been awful, but there are areas for improvement. And so I've made an effort to reach out to members as part of my candidacy and welcome communications. I've had a lot of phone calls and email conversations with members about their concerns. And and I think at the end of the day, first we all want to be heard. We want to be respected,
Mhm.
even if we're not agreed with. We don't want to be treated dismissively. And it was those feelings that that frustrated me so much. And it's really, really deep and resonant because, like, this is our place. It's our home, and we have all these strong feelings for it. And then when a piece of that is attacked or taken away, and that occurs and that occurs in ways that you feel are out of your control, and you weren't even heard or you were dismissed. Um, that kind of stuff it sours the experience. And I've talked to a couple members who've moved away out of frustration with governance.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing that we should be seeing. Now, we are a community of diverse and strongly held viewpoints. And I'm not saying I can make groups that disagree with each other agree, but I would really like everyone to feel heard and to use, fact-based discussions, not straw men and not character assassination, to come to what would be pragmatic decisions that would hew as closely towards win-win as possible. And where that's not possible, that we would seek the greatest benefit for the largest number of members, and the most minimal impact for the minority who are impacted by decisions they may not agree with. So that was, I ran because I felt like I could contribute something. I'm, retired now from running my organization, and my organization focused on customer service on the one side, and staff engagement and working closely with staff on the other, and managing a large team. And um, and it doesn't always go perfectly. You can't always meet everyone's need, and you can't always achieve agreement, but hopefully, um, it can be at least a pleasant experience. And
Yeah.
seeing folks who are like, I give up and I'm moving away, and I'm so upset about the governance here, and that's a huge part of why I'm moving away. Like that's awful. And I also see, members threatening to sue the association because they're so frustrated. And um, that to me is a real signal. It's like a last resort,
Hmm.
and and it's expensive for both sides. It's expensive for us as a community and all of us paying dues to defend those sorts of situations, and it's expensive for the person who brings that suit, and who would not be entitled to any reimbursement of their legal costs either. So they're saying, I am so upset that I'm willing to spend tens of thousands of dollars to make my point. And that says to me that's somebody who really has not been heard. Now, I think I'll say there are some people who would not be agreed with, even after being respectfully heard, who would engage in some barratry,
Yeah.
and that may occur, but it's not something that we should dismiss. It's a signal that we have members who are feeling so trodden upon that they feel like that is their last recourse, moving away being their other last recourse.
Yeah.
And uh, and I don't know for each of those individuals what issue led them to that point, and I hope to unpack that and learn and figure out if there's opportunity to do better. One that I think is worth talking about is the North Cell Tower location,
Yeah. Certainly, we've seen a
and
lot of discussion and contention there.
a ton of discussion and contention.
Yeah.
And I think most of us could agree that we would like better cell coverage for convenience and for safety. And I think you know the majority would like that. I think that we need to find ways to advance that agenda that are as harmonious a process as possible. And we don't have an agreement from cellular carriers. We don't have a memorandum of understanding from the necessary number of cellular carriers that would finance the entire business model. Like the whole thing is is hopes and dreams. But we're engaging in site selection
Yeah.
and deciding on aesthetics and altitudes, heights of towers, and what they would look like, and whose backyard they would be in, and who would they would impact. When we haven't yet demonstrated that there's a business case for it, we haven't, in my experience so far, fully explored aesthetically better, environmentally less impactful options. Small cells, camouflaged, hidden in roof lines, and integrated with buildings, integrated with existing architecture, camouflaged as if they were trees, on the side of a water tower. Lots of possibilities which would be less impactful than the 150-foot tall macro cell of the 1980s. And in my business, we provide fiber backhaul to two of the three fiber carriers in the U.S. and in cities like San Francisco and Petaluma and others. And those cities, they have a permitting process that includes aesthetics and height, and they're constrained by the FCC and the local control and local versus federal control. And there's some real regulatory navigation there. But what is um, clear right now is that communities can decide on the aesthetics of those cell towers, and they can say that it can't be bigger than X, and it needs to be camouflaged, and the generator can't put out more than X noise. And we haven't gotten through those things in a way that would be in lockstep with a carrier partner group that would also make the financial model work.
Right.
And without those prerequisites completed, we're catalyzing arguments with our members who are then saying, well, I'm going to sue because my house is losing value, or I don't like this thing. And I think that's an unfortunate outcome of the the way that the process has occurred. And it's like, and that's fine. we realize and make mistakes. We go, well, we put the cart ahead of the horse, and we were trying to get X done and Y. And I would like to hit pause and reset and say, like, okay, we don't yet have a business model, so we're not going to engage in site selection. We need to set design standards. We need to explore alternatives. How can we achieve coverage with less visual and environmental impact rather than upsetting a a vocal subset of our population who have a valid view on this? And it's correct. Some cite that technology is advancing, and direct to cellular from satellite is making good progress. And I was in an area without coverage over the weekend, and my iPhone said, send via satellite, and I hit yes, and it made me turn around 180 degrees, and then the message sent.
Uh-huh.
And we're not yet seeing ubiquitous coverage for that, and it doesn't work in all phones yet. And we don't yet have ubiquitous text to 911, and even text to the dispatch phone numbers for our public service agencies, fire and police, and so on. But if we're going to engage in building a big tall cell tower and site selection and permitting and environmental impact, all this is going to take 3 or 4 or 5 years before this occurs. And I am quite sure that those technologies will continue to evolve and move beyond just texting and become more broadly available and more reliable and more available in more types of cell phones. And we may be talking about a moot point. And to give some industry context, we used to talk a lot about Wi-Fi in cities, and cities wanted to get like downtown Wi-Fi coverage. And then cellular became so ubiquitous, it didn't matter.
Hmm.
Cities didn't need to put little wireless access points every 100 feet and connect them, and that was complex and mesh, and they would hop wirelessly to each other, and it was fraught. It never worked right. Half the time you couldn't authenticate or you couldn't connect, and it was a big investment. And the reality was that in the intervening time, and I remember cities coming to Sonic and saying, hey, you want to build fiber in our town, can we ask you to do downtown Wi-Fi? And it was like, well, as of like 3 years ago, that became so moot. Nobody wants to connect to it. Nobody needs to connect to it. Cellular is now ubiquitous and fast enough and reliable enough. And so that is also a possibility in regards to cellular coverage and the evolution of technology and satellite technology and effects at the Sea Ranch.
Dane, one thing that occurs to me here, and thank you for going into, for drilling down on, in this case, the North Cell Tower. We could have picked some other topics too, but it's but
Yeah.
it's a good one. But I'm reminded that, and I'm going to ask a little bit of history here, and then I'm going to ask you to comment. In past years, where we've had something that's kind of a big community question, a couple of them we had. One was on the management of the forests. And then some sort of simultaneous was the management of short-term rental
Yeah.
properties. In both of those cases, and they both ended up with different results. That's not my point, but in both cases, the board appointed a task force that
Yeah.
included a couple of board members, included appropriate staff people, and attempted to find members in our community that maybe had some level of expertise
Totally.
around the point in question. We've got 2,200 plus members, and it's amazing how much expertise we have in this
Yeah.
10 mile stretch.
Yeah.
And in both of those cases, the task forces went through an extensive public discussion, public comment period with multiple meetings. And I don't, whether a person agrees how either of those played out,
Yeah.
but my observation was it seems like they painstakingly listened to every point of view.
Yeah.
Oh, and that took time.
Hmm.
That took many months and everything. Um, is that a model we should? Is that not a model? Is that an approach we might think about again? Whether it's the North Cell Tower or management of the airstrip, or pick any topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think t the key point here is we have members with expertise who are interested in topics and who would like to advocate for outcomes and who deserve to be heard and who are willing to assist in shepherding those processes. Now, obviously, we have to be careful about the makeup of those groups and that the outcomes are not foregone conclusions, but they are a
Right.
true open and collaborative process that works together to achieve a consensus outcome. So it needs to be done with care, but we've got subsets of our population that have a strong interest in one topic or another. And as those things arise, we should engage with those folks, in my view. And you mentioned the airstrip. That process wasn't utilized when it
Right.
came to the new restrictions at the airstrip.
Right.
And the pilots, who are a tiny minority, perhaps 20 folks, and so a fraction of a percent are greatly impacted by the issue, but were not invited to the table. And so there was no collaborative process. There was no
Yeah.
working group. There was little opportunity for input, and I think that that leads to worse outcomes, and more frustrated members who are affected by the negative outcomes. And so I do think that kind of a model makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I'm reminded, you may have heard this too, the great, one of my favorite poets, Maya Angelou.
Hmm.
Um, and I may misquote her here, but she once said, um, "People won't people won't remember what you said, and people won't remember what you did, but they'll never forget how you made
How you
them
made them
feel."
feel.
Yeah, and it's
Yes.
like, boy, every time I look at that or think about it,
Yeah.
there's a lot of validity and truth in
Yeah.
that. Let's jump just one. I'm going to completely pivot to another topic that, I mean, semi-related here, and maybe we'll take a few more minutes before we draw to a close. One thing I've noticed over the years is that there's been a pretty marked decrease in volunteer participation with our what I'll call our institutions that provided ways
Yeah.
for volunteers. Many of those are, well, several of them are policy committees, which I think
Yeah.
you're the liaison to utilities committee, and
Correct.
those are embodied in our CCNRs. Those are we've made that our own law that we're going to have those committees. Other committees get chartered from time to time, um, and they don't necessarily report to the board, but they have an existence. They're
Yeah.
formed deliberately. They have a charter and an existence. My observation, and I've participated in a number of those opportunities over the years. But what I've noted is that there's been a decrease in volunteer population. I'll mention one right now. The Utilities Committee, up until about, I don't know, 18 months ago or so, was a much more robust group. There were 8 to 10 people. Several of them were engineers with expertise in
Yeah.
infrastructure and utility stuff, and not to mention an unpleasant incident, but they all resigned en masse
Right.
because they felt that they were being stonewalled and stuff. Other groups, we don't have an election committee anymore. So
Right.
there's no direct way for members. I'm not saying that the job hasn't been handled well, but there's no opportunity for member oversight in elections, which is an important thing. Um,
Yeah.
other other committees, and if you poll our various committees, many of whom do really useful and important work. The Trails
Yeah.
Committee has done exemplary work for a number of years. We've
Yeah.
got one of the most fantastic trail systems of anybody on the West Coast. We're
Right.
really lucky. Other than Vision and Archives, they all do important work. But what I note, and from talking to folks there, uh, that the members are aging, and people are facing health issues, and some have to move away for health issues, and
I
frankly,
think
some folks just pass away. But I'm not seeing them replaced.
I
There's not a pipeline. There's no new volunteers coming in, or very limited, very few.
Yeah, I think you've answered your own question there. That would be my response, is that it is a demographic shift.
Yeah.
And we see this at the Air Museum and at the Sonoma County Airport. You have a lot of amazing volunteers who are aging,
Yeah.
and they're not on a 1-to-1 ratio being replaced by younger folks as they find that they can't communicate, engage in the same way in the volunteerism that they were engaged in. I think also COVID created a demographic shift at the Sea Ranch
Yeah.
with for a short period of time, a huge burst of full-time residents who then turned it into a vacation house,
Right.
and now we seldom see them. And so I think there's been a shift in the demographics, whether it's the residency or the age, that is naturally leading to that kind of an outcome. Now, your point about the utility committee is a different scenario, and that is I give up. I'm frustrated. We all quit, right? And that is an outcome of frustration, not of just we lost 3 volunteers because 2 moved away and 1 is not well enough to fully engage. Um, but so I think the answer is primarily demographics and changes in the makeup. And Natine has been really good um, about talking about trying to engage new residents
Hmm.
and younger residents
Hmm.
who may not know what opportunities exist. And I'll say as a we, we've been a resident at Sea Ranch for 6 years, and I didn't get, or it didn't reach my awareness that I was
Hmm.
invited to come participate in X.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
remedy might be further outreach,
Hmm.
and perhaps there's opportunity for remedy there. And I think both in Nitin's case and in mine, like we saw the board as an opportunity to engage in volunteerism and to further the community. But there are a lot of other opportunities.
Right.
And I think we need to surface those for folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, one area, George, that I was thinking about, and if you don't mind, I'll
Oh,
segue.
please do. Please do.
The One of the policy items um, that has been a topic of debate has been cameras at the airstrip. We talk about airstrip
Yep.
policies and so on.
Certainly has.
And um, I have articulated my concerns about those deployments with item 1 being, privacy and the culture and the appropriateness of this, and item 2 being it's really expensive. And to buy $30,000 worth of cameras and spend $10,000 a year to archive those in cloud storage in some faraway data center is an excessive way to solve the problem if you agree on square one that there's a problem to solve. Now, this is the second deployment of cameras at the Sea Ranch. The first was at the pool at Moonraker.
Yeah.
There are 2 cameras there, and one watched the sliding door, the entrance, and the other watches the pool area. And they're basic ring type cameras like you would buy on Amazon for a few $100s, and they're moderate quality, and they were deployed to solve a specific problem that was not related to our members. We were suffering damage and vandalism. It
Right.
became a bit of a local teenage challenge to come hop the fence at Moonraker and do damage to our pool. And so we had a security issue that was resulting in damage to the property that we as members and through the association own. And we put basic, inexpensive, off-the-shelf surveillance cameras in place to try to catch non-members engaging in malicious damage to our facilities. The cameras at the airstrip are completely different. They are surveillance of our members
Mm.
with the presupposition that there are violations of our regulations and that those members need to be caught violating our regulations.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there is no credible, tangible evidence that there's any violations occurring that would justify that surveillance. And George, I was upset about this, and I posted on the Sea Ranch Facebook group about, how creepy I thought this was, and the culture of deflock, and the people's concerns about flock cameras managing, keeping track of everywhere you went. The airstrip cameras are radar tracking. They get the transponder code of the aircraft. They look up the ownership of the aircraft. They store that information in a database. They notify security. They use optical character recognition and AI to read the registration on the side of aircraft. And it is an excessive level. And the responses that I got to those Facebook posts, the vast majority of responses were like, yeah, that does not align with our culture. That
Yeah.
is not what the culture of the Sea Ranch is. Now, those posts were removed, and and so that argument was silenced. But the signal that I got, and I made, I think, 3 posts, and all 3 of those were removed. Um, and but each garnered like 20 responses, and then it quietly disappeared. And the 20 responses, all of them were like, yeah, why are we doing that? Like, A, why are we spending our money on this? It's not a problem we want to spend money on. And B, yeah, this is not in alignment with our culture. And if you were to draw an analogy, would we have cameras on every trail because we want to catch people leaving dog waste on the side of the trail? And there we actually have violations. Like, it's actually a problem.
Yeah.
But we don't deal with that by creating a big brother state and spending what would be tens of thousands of dollars on that kind of a solution to the problem. So that's an area. You talk about goals and culture. Um, I think that we need to be a mature culture of adults and trust, and we need to spend our money wisely, and we need to take a hard look at the um, the use of facts and accusations to justify, oh, we should spend all this money and surveil our members. And that's one example of the kinds of um, decision making that I think is frustrating to see. And it's an example of something that I'd like to see us take another look at.
Thanks. Thanks. Well, Dane, I think we've covered a couple of good topics. It sounds like we could go on for a while here on a whole number of things. But
Yeah.
in
And
the
I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and
no,
I really enjoy the dialogue.
no, absolutely, it's really great. And I'm going to suggest that down the line, once you kind of are a few months down the road here, with your involvement in the board, that we get together again, as I will ask other board members to do the same, and to speak to their concerns and their thoughts.
Yeah, I think that would be useful and certainly welcome that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'll also reiterate, I'm interested, I have I've only been a resident at Sea Ranch for 6 years. I'm new to this board, and the quantity of things that I don't understand is far larger than the quantity that I do. And so I really welcome input from our members, including in particular past board members, folks that have been engaged in committees and leadership and volunteerism. And so as issues arise and as decisions are being made, I'd love to get input, an email, a phone call.
Yeah.
My email address is dane@sonic.net. Couldn't
That's
be any
easy.
easier.
Yep.
Couldn't be any easier to remember. And I really would love to hear from folks that have some expertise, some history, an opinion, a cultural context for why an item is sensitive and how it should be considered. And so I really would love that input. And so thanks for the opportunity to air that.
Absolutely. We'll try and make that happen with this program as well.
Yes. All right. Cool.
Dane, thanks so much. I appreciate your time with us. It's really great. Hang in there. We'll close the taping and everything, but we'll speak a little bit afterwards if that's okay.
All right.
And for all the viewers, you have been hearing from Dane Jasper, one of our newly elected board members here at the Sea Ranch. And Dane has shared a lot of his thoughts and concerns and goals and hopes, I would say, and really appreciate it. Thanks a lot for joining us. You've been watching This Sea Ranch Life. We've been in a conversation with Dane Jasper. Thanks.